was very weird going to the Russian rocket forces and saying, I'd like to buy 2 of your biggest rockets, but you can keep the nuke. When I was young, I didn't really know what I was going to do when I got older. People kept asking me, but then eventually I thought that the idea of inventing things would be really cool. And the reason I thought that was because I read a quote from Arthur C. Clarke, which said that a sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that's really true. If you go back, say 300 years, the things that we take for granted today would be you'd be burned at the stake for. You know, being able to fly, that's crazy. Being able to see over long distances, being able to communicate, and having access to all the world's information instantly from almost anywhere on the earth. This is stuff that really would be magic, or would be considered magic in times past. In fact, I think it actually goes beyond that, because there are many things that we take for granted today that weren't even imagined in times past. They weren't even in the realm of magic. So it actually goes beyond that. So I thought, well, you know, if I can do some of those things, basically if I can advance technology, then that's like magic, and that would be really cool. Because I was trying to figure out what does it all mean? Like, what's the purpose of things? And I came to the conclusion that if we can advance the knowledge of the world, if we can do things that expand the scope and scale of consciousness, then we're better able to ask the right questions and become more enlightened, and that's really the only way forward. So I decided to drop out. Now, obviously, fortunately, we're past graduation, so I can't be accused of recommending that to you. So did some internet stuff. You know, did a few things here and there. One of which was PayPal. And I think maybe it's helpful to say one of the things that was important there in the creation of PayPal was kind of how it started, because initially the initial thought was with PayPal was to create an agglomeration of financial services, so to have one place where all of your financial services needs would be seamlessly integrated and work smoothly. And then we had like a little feature which was to do email payments. And whenever we'd show the system off to someone, we'd show the hard part, which was the agglomeration of financial services, which was quite difficult to put together. Nobody was interested. Then we'd show people email payments, which was actually quite easy, and everybody was interested. So this is I think it's important to take feedback from your environment. You know, you want to be as closed loop as possible. Going from PayPal, what are some of the other problems that are likely to most affect the future of humanity? It really wasn't from the perspective of what's the rank-ordered best way to make money, which is okay, but it was really what I think is going to most affect the future of humanity. So I think the biggest terrestrial problem we've got is sustainable energy, but the production and consumption of energy in a sustainable manner. If we don't solve that this century, we're in deep trouble. And then the other one being the extension of life beyond Earth to make life multiplanetary. So that's the basis for. The latter is the basis for SpaceX, and the former is the basis for Tesla and Solar City. And when I started SpaceX, I thought that, well, there's no way one could possibly start a rocket company. I wasn't that crazy. But then I thought, well, what is a way to increase NASA's budget? That was actually my initial goal. So I thought, well, if we can do a low-cost mission to Mars, something called Mars Oasis. The public tends to respond to precedents and superlatives, and this would be the first life on Mars, the furthest that life's ever traveled, as far as we know. And I thought, well, that would get people really excited, and therefore increase NASA's budget. So obviously, the financial outcome from such a mission would probably be zero. So anything better than that was on the upside. So I actually went to Russia 3 times, and I can tell you it was very weird going there in 2000, late 2001, 2002, going to the Russian rocket forces and saying, I'd like to buy 2 of your biggest rockets, but you can keep the nuke. That's a lot more. That was 10 years ago, I guess. So, but if people think it's impossible, then or it's going to completely break the federal budget, then they're not going to do it. So after my 3rd trip, I said, okay, well, what we really need to do here is try to solve the space transport problem, and started SpaceX. This was against the advice of pretty much everyone I talked to. One friend made me sit down and watch a bunch of videos of rockets blowing up. Let me tell you, he wasn't far wrong. It was tough going there in the beginning because I'd never built anything physical. I mean, I'd built like little model rockets as a kid and that kind of thing, but I'd never had a company that built anything physical. So I had to kind of figure out how to do all these things and bring together the right team of people, and so we did all that and then failed 3 times. It was tough going, because the thing about a rocket is that the passing grade is 100%. The first launch, I was picking up bits of rocket near the launch site. It was a bit sad, but we learned with each successive flight, and were able to eventually with the 4th flight in 2008 reach orbit, and that was also with the last bit of money that we had. So thank goodness that happened. I think the saying is 4th time's the charm. So we got the Falcon 1 to orbit, and then began to scale that up to the Falcon 9, which is about an order of magnitude more thrust. It's around 1 million pounds of thrust, and we managed to get that to orbit, and then developed a Dragon spacecraft, which recently was able to dock and return to Earth from the space station. So yeah, it's a huge relief. Still can't quite believe it actually happened. That's I think where things are, and hopefully that there are some lessons to be drawn there. But I think the overarching point I want to make is that you guys are the magicians of the 21st century. Don't let anything hold you back. Imagination is the limit, and go out there and create some magic. Thank you.
I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. You've got to find what you love, and that is as true for work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. Today, I want to tell you 3 stories from my life. That's it. No big deal. Just 3 stories. The first story is about connecting the dots. I dropped out of Reed College after the first 6 months, but then stayed around as a drop-in for another 18 months or so before I really quit. So why'd I drop out? My biological mother was a young, unwed graduate student, and she decided to put me up for adoption. She felt very strongly that I should be adopted by college graduates, so everything was all set for me to be adopted at birth by a lawyer and his wife. This was the start in my life. And 17 years later, I did go to college. After 6 months, I couldn't see the value in it. I had no idea what I wanted to do with my life, and no idea how college was going to help me figure it out. And here I was, spending all of the money my parents had saved their entire life. So I decided to drop out and trust that it would all work out okay. It was pretty scary at the time, but looking back, it was one of the best decisions I ever made. The minute I dropped out, I could stop taking the required classes that didn't interest me and begin dropping in on the ones that looked far more interesting. It wasn't all romantic. I didn't have a dorm room, so I slept on the floor in friends' rooms. I returned Coke bottles for the 5-cent deposits to buy food with. and I would walk the 7 miles across town every Sunday night to get one good meal a week at the Hare Krishna temple. Much of what I stumbled into by following my curiosity and intuition turned out to be priceless later on. Because I had dropped out and didn't have to take the normal classes, I decided to take a calligraphy class to learn how to do this. None of this had even a hope of any practical application in my life. But 10 years later, when we were designing the first Macintosh computer, it all came back to me. And we designed it all into the Mac. It was the first computer with beautiful typography. If I had never dropped in on that single course in college, the Mac would have never had multiple typefaces or proportionally spaced fonts. If I had never dropped out, I would have never dropped in on that calligraphy class, and personal computers might not have the wonderful typography that they do. So you have to trust that the dots will somehow connect in your future. You have to trust in something, your gut, destiny, life, karma, whatever. Because believing that the dots will connect down the road will give you the confidence to follow your heart, even when it leads you off the well-worn path, and that will make all the difference. My second story is about love and loss. I was lucky. I found what I loved to do early in life. Woz and I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We just released our finest creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and I just turned 30. And then I got fired. How can you get fired from a company you started? Well, as Apple grew, we hired someone who I thought was very talented to run the company with me. And for the first year or so, things went well. But then our visions of the future began to diverge, and eventually we had a falling out. What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone, and it was devastating. I really didn't know what to do for a few months. I felt that I had let the previous generation of entrepreneurs down, that I had dropped the baton as it was being passed to me. I was a very public failure, and I even thought about running away from the valley. But something slowly began to dawn on me. I still loved what I did. The turn of events at Apple had not changed that one bit. I'd been rejected, but I was still in love. And so I decided to start over. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. During the next 5 years, I started a company named Next, another company named Pixar, and fell in love with an amazing woman who would become my wife. Pixar went on to create the world's first computer animated feature film, Toy Story, and is now the most successful animation studio in the world. Apple bought Next, and I returned to Apple, and the technology we developed at Next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance. And Lorene and I have a wonderful family together. I'm pretty sure none of this would have happened if I hadn't been fired from Apple. It was awful tasting medicine, but I guess the patient needed it. Sometimes life's going to hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith. I'm convinced that the only thing that kept me going was that I loved what I did. You've got to find what you love. And that is as true for work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking and don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking, don't settle. My third story is about death. When I was 17, I read a quote that went something like, "If you live each day as if it was your last, someday you'll most certainly be right." It made an impression on me, and since then, for the past 33 years, I've looked in the mirror every morning and asked myself, if today were the last day of my life, would I want to do what I am about to do today? And whenever the answer has been no for too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. Remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make the big choices in life. Because almost everything, all external expectations, all pride, all fear of embarrassment or failure, these things just fall away in the face of death, leaving only what is truly important. Remembering that you are going to die is the best way I know to avoid the trap of thinking you have something to lose. About a year ago, I was diagnosed with cancer, I had a scan at 7:30 in the morning, and it clearly showed a tumor on my pancreas. I didn't even know what a pancreas was. The doctors told me this was almost certainly a type of cancer that is incurable, and that I should expect to live no longer than 3 to 6 months. My doctor advised me to go home and get my affairs in order, which is doctor's code for prepare to die. It means to try and tell your kids everything you thought you'd have the next 10 years to tell them in just a few months. It means to make sure everything is buttoned up so that it will be as easy as possible for your family. It means to say your goodbyes. Death is the destination we all share. No one has ever escaped it. And that is as it should be, because death is very likely the single best invention of life. It's life's change agent. It clears out the old to make way for the new. Right now, the new is you. But someday, not too long from now, you will gradually become the old and be cleared away. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. And most important, have the courage to follow your heart and intuition. They somehow already know what you truly want to become. Everything else is secondary. Stay hungry, stay foolish.
If you want to have financial freedom, well, then how are you going to get there? The answer is you have to have financial discipline. And same thing with more free time. If you want to have more free time, then you have to have a more disciplined time management schedule. And you have to have discipline in your life to say no to the things that aren't actually moving you towards whatever goals you have. It seems like sleeping in the morning is a form of freedom because, hey, I don't have to do anything. I'm just going to sleep in. But the reality is when you sleep in, now you don't get things done. And now those things that you were supposed to do aren't done. And now the next day you have to wake up early and get them done, not because you want to, but because you have to. So you've become a slave to the fact that you didn't have discipline. So if you actually want to have freedom in your life, you have to implement discipline on yourself. When we work with companies where the company that is actually asking us to come in and, maybe the CEO is saying, hey, we want you to come and help us. That company, they're already doing well. They're already being successful. And their attitude is, hey, we need help. We want to get better. We want to be more successful. And those companies, they ramp up really quickly and we have a great time working with them. Sometimes we work with companies where, let's say we get brought in by the board, brings us in because the company's not doing well. Well, right off the bat, the company's not doing well and they don't think they need any help. And so it's the opposite effect. They're saying, well, we don't need any help. We don't need you guys here. And the fact of the matter is they need us more than the other folks do. But the reason that they need help is the reason we're there in the first place. It's the reason they're not doing well, because they're not looking at themselves every day humbly and saying, what can we do better? How can we improve? How can we adjust right now and turn our game around or improve our game so that we can get better in the market? So if you and I are working together and I'm the boss and I have a big ego and I think I'm better than you, and you come to me with an idea, I immediately shut you out. Well, what if your plan was a better plan? Or what if you had some piece of knowledge that made sense for a particular operation, but my ego is too big to listen to you? Well, now we go out and we put lives at risk and possibly lose lives because my ego is too big. Same thing you could say about the enemy, right? If I don't think the enemy is any good, all the enemy's no good, they don't train hard, and they're not prepared for the big tough SEALs. Well, if you have that attitude, guess what? Maybe those guys are training harder. And if you start cutting corners in your training, you're going to get caught. And obviously, it's the same thing in the business world. When a company's doing well, if the company stays humble while they're doing well, they're still looking for how they can improve. They're still looking for things that they can do better. And they will stay on top. But the minute a company says, that's right, we're the best, and no one else even stands a chance, well, guess what? Those people down there on the bottom, they're hungry, and they're going to come and get them. That I noticed with the people we wanted to work for and I wanted to do a good job for, those guys are the most humble people. And ironically, always the most experienced too. So the most experienced people would be the most humble, and the least experienced people would be the least humble and be the most imposing of how they wanted to do things, which is not a good way to lead. People say, how can I get discipline in my life? And I tell them, step number one is wake up early. And I know people don't want to do it. It's harsh, I know that your alarm clock is, your most hated object in your bedroom. I get that. But here's the deal with getting up early in the morning. When you get up early in the morning, if you can get up before the rest of the world is awake, right? Before the enemy's awake, before the rest of the world is awake, you can get so much done. You're so much more productive without your phone going off, without people sending you emails and texting you or calling you. And you wake up in the morning, there's just quiet, and you can get things done. And you should do things, and I do things in the morning that I know they're a priority for my life, but maybe they're not a priority for that day, right? So, like for instance, working out. Working out, you gotta work out every day. You gotta stay in shape. If you don't stay in shape, you die, right? So you gotta stay in shape. But working out might not be a priority for every single day because you've got things going on in your business world and with your family and all that. So guess what? It's a priority for my life, so I do it in the morning before my day even starts. So I can still handle the priorities for the day, but I got my workout done. So long term, I look up in a year and I'm not out of shape and breathing hard when I go up in the stairs because I maintain that discipline on a daily basis. It tunes your mind, it puts more oxygen in your blood, in your brain. It is absolutely makes you think more clearly. So waking up early, working out every day, if you start with those two kind of cornerstones, and then the other thing is, figure out what you're gonna do during the day. Don't go to bed without a plan of how you're gonna handle the next day. And so I only schedule hardcore like 4 hours a day. The other hours I'm picking up, I'm getting phone calls, I'm adapting and maneuvering on other things that need to be executed on. But what is important, those 4 hours, they get done. They get done. And that's the difference between finishing writing a book and not finishing writing a book. Because, when I write a book, I write 1,000 words a day. It takes me about an hour. That's what I do. I write 1,000 words a day. And in 30 days, you got 30,000 words. And in 60 days, you got 60,000 words. And in 90 days, you got 90,000 words, and that's a book. That's 3 months. And it took you an hour a day. And that's exactly what I did with the books that I've written. And it's the same thing with physical fitness. You don't get in amazing shape in this short amount of time, but you get in amazing shape in a short amount of time, day after day after day after day. Remember, everyone here wants to enjoy their life to the maximum, but if you want that kind of freedom, it all starts with the discipline.
And I always tell people, losers react, leaders anticipate. I mean, anyone who is incredibly successful has failed more than other people. You just don't see it because they got back up so fast and they learned from it, right? That's really how it is. The fastest way to avoid failure is not to learn by your own experience, but to learn by other people's experiences. I believe that leadership is really a skill of influence. It is the most important skill that any human being can master. And I don't think of leadership as a position. I see it as a skill, a tool that all of us have to have. In other words, the quality of your life, I really believe, comes down to your level of leadership. Other people don't have to follow you to be a leader, but you have to live life on your terms. And the first person you have to influence is yourself. Whether you're fit or fat, whether your kids are on drugs or not, it's who has more influence, the guy on the street corner or you. Whether you're fit or fat is, can you influence your own hands, your own body, your own mind to do what's necessary? So I think to be able to influence the thoughts, the feelings, the emotions, and the actions of another human being, that's what leadership is. And quality leadership, obviously authentic leadership, is one where it's servant leadership. You're looking to influence those thoughts, feelings, emotions, and actions for a greater good, not just for yourself. And I think the people that master that are the people that you know about. I mean, they're captains of industry, they're people that are celebrities because they've learned how to influence people. They are some of the greatest teachers, some of the greatest scientists, because you can't just come up with ideas. Ideas will die on your lips unless you become a person of influence, and that's what leadership is. If you look at a business, the chokehold on the growth of any business is always the psychology and the skill set of the leader. And it's 80% psychology and 20% mechanics, meaning so many small businesses, the owner might be an incredible innovator. Maybe they write incredible code. Maybe they're a tremendous influencer, but they don't know the economic side of their business, right? And they find themselves getting in trouble because somebody's giving them financial information after the fact. They don't have true financial intelligence to make decisions, and they get caught up. So I say to people in business, I say to them, you want to understand psychology? Here's the biggest challenge for most businesses. They think they've maxed what's possible because they think they've tried everything. Once you believe that, your belief controls you and you miss the innovations, you miss the answers. Changing the psychology of the leader is what will change a business faster than anything else. Changing their skills will also do it, but lots of people have the skill and they don't execute. And you and I both know, execution's more important than knowledge. Knowledge is trumped by execution every single day. And that execution comes by changing the psychology. People are not one way. We are a reflection of the states we're living in. When you're in a frustrated state, an overwhelmed state, a tired state, your brain processes completely differently than if you're in a passionate state, whether you're feeling determined, whether you're feeling committed, whether you feel completely resolved. So learning to change the leader's state, learning how to change your own state. Because, people, one of the silliest questions I get asked is, you're not really that happy, are you? You have bad days, don't you? Well, of course I have, bad times. But I don't have bad days anymore, and it's not BS, it's because I've trained myself like an athlete to go in these peak states so often that they're just natural for me. It's like building a muscle. So it's not like I'm so smart or I'm just so positive. It's just like, why would I waste my time stressing out? I have a 90-second rule. I'll stress for 90 seconds, but stress is not going to solve it. Let me put myself back in a different state. And so the way I do that is I use my body. Because I've done this with athletes for decades, with billionaire businessmen. If you see somebody gets in a slump of some sort, great athlete, Paul Tudor Jones, one of the greatest financial traders in the history of the world, I've coached him for 22 years. When I came to see him, this is a man who made 200% in 1987 when the stock market had its biggest single crash in the day, percentage-wise still. He made 200% for his clients, more money than anybody could dream of. Then he went to the moon and he went down to earth and he lost money. So I was brought in to turn him around. Well, how do you turn a guy like that around? Yeah. I watched him. His shoulders were down. He was breathing like this. He's sitting like this the whole time because he'd been through these failures and it started to get stored in his body. Now in this state, this man is a genius, couldn't do it. So I watched films when he was at his best. And he's like standing up and he's doing this. This is what I'm gonna do, sell this, make this happen. And the movement, the intensity, the way he used his face. And so I showed him a video of himself today. I showed him a video when he was at his best. And I said, what do you notice? He was like, those are two different people. I said, yes, but we can get back to this guy by just using the body first. Trying to use your mind, you'll go in circles. But I've been teaching for years that a radical change in your body instantly changes your biochemistry. And I always tell people, losers react, leaders anticipate. Anyone who is incredibly successful has failed more than other people. You just don't see it because they got back up so fast and they learned from it, right? That's really how it is. The fastest way to avoid failure is not to learn by your own experience, but to learn by other people's experiences, right? The way I believe in compressing decades into days. And the way you do that is modeling, once again. Finding someone who is the most successful in the world, take them 20, 30 years, and digging in and figuring out what is the core essence of what's made them successful. What are the failures they had, what they learned from them so you can avoid them. But the other part is you also have to know that success is buried on the other side of failure. It's buried on the other side of frustration. It's buried on the other side of conflict. And so you have to see this as part of the natural evolution. All failure is it's a speed bump on the way to success. And I learned that as long as you keep getting back up, failure is just a speed bump to success and nothing's gonna stop me in this job or anything else I do. I really think we're all afraid to fail, but it's the only way to learn sometimes. When people succeed, they tend to party. When you fail, you tend to ponder. And in the pondering is when you usually get the growth, the insight, the strategy that'll change your business, that'll change your personal life, that'll change your finances. And so I think, I don't vote for failure for anybody, but to think you're not going to experience it is absurd. The way to not experience it is to turn it into learning. The person that can go through failure like butter and it doesn't stop them, they just change their approach, how long will you give your average child to learn how to walk? Before you shut them off and said you're not a walker. People go, what are you, crazy? My kid's gonna keep trying until he or she is a walker. Well, that's why almost everybody walks. Right. But singing, how many people sing? Small amount, because someone says, what's that noise you're making? Stop that, you're not a singer. Well, once you decide that, you stop trying. Failure is only when you permanently give up. If you learned anything and you apply what you've learned, failure is a stepping stone.
School failed me. School's failing entrepreneurs every single day because it's not built for entrepreneurship. It's built for workers. What happened with me is I had the great benefit of being an immigrant. I was born in Belarus, in the former Soviet Union, and came to the States in '78 when they let some Jews out of there. And we set up in Queens and my parents lived the American dream. They worked very hard. My dad was a stock boy in a liquor store in Clark, New Jersey, and eventually became the manager of that store, and eventually saved up enough money to buy a store in Springfield, New Jersey. I was lemonade stands, baseball cards, real hustler kid, blow pops, anything to make a buck. And at 14, I got dragged into the store. You know, oldest son, immigrant family. I always tell people, Larry, that I lived their grandparents' life more than theirs, right? I'm a couple generations behind most. I did it in the 70s and 80s and 90s when most people did in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. I fell in love with people collecting wine when I was 17 because I was into collecting sports cards. That was my connection point. I wanted to build 4,000 wine shops. I was gonna build a Toys R Us of wine, sell the franchise, buy the New York Jets. That's what the plan was. Heard the internet my freshman year of college, heard that sound, knew that it was special, and in 1996 I launched one of the first e-commerce wine businesses in America, called WineLibrary.com. Took over my dad's business, kind of running it day to day in 1998 alongside with him, and from 98 to 2003, helped grow that business from a $3 to a $60 million business. That became the foundation. Built that on e-commerce, email marketing, banner advertising, Google AdWords, things that the marketing world didn't believe yet. And then YouTube came out, and I started a wine show 4 months after YouTube started. I grew up a wine expert. From 15 to 30, in those 15 years, my whole life was wine.
Were you always successful?
In everything but school. Poor. Terrible, actually. Punted it. You know, it was funny. And this is where I give my parents enormous credit. And it's funny, it's a business book that says self-awareness. My parents grew up, and I give them so much credit, in a world where all their contemporaries, and you know this, education's the way out for immigrants. My mom recognized that I was a merchant, an entrepreneur. School failed me. School's failing entrepreneurs every single day because it's not built for entrepreneurship. It's built for workers. You know, if you're being taught to play within the lines, and there's nothing being taught that maps to the entrepreneurial market. As a matter of fact, my biggest cynicism when I sit across an entrepreneur today is if they are too successful at school. I probably look at Ivy League grads starting startups right now with more of a negative light, because what I've learned over the last 5 to 7 years, and by the way, in the last 2 or 3 years, I've taken a step back on this because there's too many entrepreneurial friends who've gone to great schools that have been successful. So this is not a blanket statement, but I will tell you that in a world of private schools, in a world of mommy and daddy having a lot of connections, that when you go from 12, 15, 18 years of that ecosystem and you go into a market and you create an app, the market doesn't give a crap who your dad is. The market responds to your product, and a lot of these kids have not been able to take the punch in the mouth that comes along with entrepreneurship. The things that I've been pushing people to do is, one, create an ecosystem where you make the people closest to you feel comfortable to tell you the truth. So one of the things I've been asking for people to do is tell your mom and dad and spouse, best friend, coworker, hey, tell me the truth. What am I good at? What am I bad at? And spend a month or two to get them comfortable to actually tell you the truth, because the people that love you sure don't want to tell you. I think we're living through a very interesting moment. I believe that the telephone is becoming the television, and the television is becoming the radio. And I've been spending a lot of time studying the transition in the late 50s from radio to television, because this is the first time we've had a platform shift in our society in a half a century, and I think it's a very big deal. And I've been spending an enormous amount of time the last 5 years trying to be the best storyteller for that platform. Well, I think we first understand that social media is a slang term for the current state of the internet. And when you position social media that way, you take it a lot more seriously. So step one, Larry, for 97% of the people that are watching is to actually take it serious. That's number one. And again, we were talking as we were getting ready, a lot of radio people didn't take television serious when the transition happened. That was their loss, right? That's what's happening right now, Larry. This is historic. The history always tells you the future. And so that's what's happening. So first, take it serious. Two, understand that Facebook and Instagram and Snapchat and YouTube, these are different channels. It's the difference between CNN and Fox and ABC and sports ESPN. You've got to understand the context of the medium that you're on. So when you're storytelling about your business on YouTube, you've got to produce different content than when you're putting a picture on Facebook. So again, I think that people underestimate context of the medium. Number three, it's understanding that you have to provide value. Too many businesses right now on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, every post they put out is buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. Here's where I'm gonna be. Check me out. Buy my book. Check out my experience. Watch me on my show. And nobody's providing value. So the prior book I wrote to this was called Jab, 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 Right Hook. Give, 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 ask. And it gave people a formula of how to put out content that actually gave people enough value that you then had them in a consideration to buy your stuff. When I came to America, in Queens and in Dover, I couldn't speak English. Dover, New Jersey. And
Hebrew?
No, I wasn't speaking Yiddish, but I was speaking Russian. But there was something when I moved to Edison, New Jersey, the kid, Eric Godfrey, Robbie Turnick, they were playing football, and they made me a Jets fan, and it was my first American thing. And my mom, everybody had a Jets jersey, and I wanted one. And my mom, we couldn't afford stuff like that. It's not what immigrants do. You don't go out and buy a $30 Jets jersey. So my mom knitted me one. And so I have it. It's my prized possession. It's literally my prized possession. And I've created a fairy tale in my mind somewhere around 2nd or 3rd grade that I was gonna go from not being able to afford a jersey to owning the whole damn thing. And that is the quest to buy the Jets is my happiness. Whether I buy them or not, so many variables. One, that cash is oxygen. I'm blown away by all these people that are starting businesses that don't realize that money is important. Like they think about all these things. They're trying to think about 4 years from now and they haven't made their first check. Just complete lack of practicality when thinking about a business. Number 2, strengths. Are you a salesman? Are you the accountant? Do you have financial strength? Do you have sales strength? Are you operationally? Are you good at HR? Whatever you're best at, do that. Surround yourself with the other 3 or 4 pillars that need to have a business. And number 3, look for the white space. Meaning, where are people not marketing and storytelling that you can? Is Snapchat, is YouTube, is a blog or a podcast your way to separate yourself from everybody else while they're running direct mail or radio or television or print advertising? What's the white space in your sector that nobody else is filling? I think first of all, I'm an EQ HR driven CEO. I think I win not on my IQ, but on my emotional intelligence. I think that I'm very in tune to people's feelings. I try to reverse engineer what they're about. For example, I have no interest in my kids being anything but who they are. My mom gifted me by parenting me to my strengths. If my kids are artists or want to be in the nonprofit sector or climb mountains, I'm all in. I want them to do them. The one line in the sand I have is no 8th place trophies. Lizzie knows, and now I'm looking at the camera because I want her to see my eyes again, no 8th place trophies. Life is about winning and losing. It's binary, right? So as long as my kids know that, I don't care what they do. They don't need to make money. They don't need to be entrepreneurs. But to win, there's a real market. To be a great artist, to be great at helping other people, you have to be great at it.